speaking about the great Ponevezher Rav. I want to talk about his Mesiras Nefesh, his sacrifice for Torah, for building Torah, but to appreciate his Mesiras Nefesh for Torah, we have to appreciate and understand his godless Torah, how great a Gaon he was. Rav Aaron Kotler, considered by many like the Eloi of Europe, the greatest Torah scholar of his generation, coming out of the yeshivas, said about him, if the Ponevezher was pater from all that he was Torah'd with and all that he was involved in, to build all that he built, all he could do was spend time learning, we would be like a peel of a garlic compared to him. That's how great he was considered. One of his cohorts said about him that there wasn't a Tosfos, big or small, in the whole Shas. There was Kemunach B'Kufsa, there was sealed by him in the whole Shas, every Tosfos. He had tremendous, everybody talks about his tremendous Abbas Torah, his Mesikas Torah, the sweetness of Torah, how much he loved to learn. And how much such a person would want to sit and learn, and even if he wasn't just sitting and learning, how much he would want to say Shurim in a fledgling yeshiva like Ponevezher in the 50s and the 60s, which was developing and getting bigger and bigger. And the truth is, raising funds, which he was always doing 9 months a year, 1 year I counted for, running around like who knows what, and leaving the yeshiva mamish totally in the hands of his very able, active Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Shach, Rav Shmuel Rozovsky, Rav David Pavarsky, the famous Meshgichim, Rav Dessler, and Rav Chatzkel Levenstein, and he mamish gave that away. Rav Chatzkel Levenstein said that sometimes the Rav would come in and out, it was like a guest almost coming into his yeshiva, which he gave away, and he was so aptly able to run a yeshiva and to be a Rosh Yeshiva, but he knew that there was another calling for him, something else that was necessary and needed, and he could leave that to someone else. And I think personally, that's a big part of the Hatzlacha that he had, because he was so selfless. He said about himself, Hikravti Hagon mi Ponevezher, I gave up on the great genius of Ponevezher for the yeshiva of Ponevezher. He was once traveling from Manchester to London, and his family was trying to track him down. He was pushing himself so hard that he had a terrible fever. He was almost unconscious and had to be removed from a train at a hospital. A sister of a Talmud saw him running around one time. He told her brother back in Eretz Yisrael, I hope you're learning doubly hard, because how much do we see how the Ponevezher Rav is running around, so you should be able to learn. And the Ponevezher Rav said the story, doubly hard? He should be learning 7 times harder. And of course, Bizyonis, we've talked about in other series, is the Bizyonis, it wasn't like today. Sometimes a Gadol Ador comes, people would just come to see him. It wasn't like that 40, 50, 60 years ago. He traveled Bizyonis, sufferings, humiliations, raising money. Listen to this, how Shmuel Rozovsky, who was, the most dominant of the Rosh Yeshiva and Ponevezher in his time, he said like this: even when he was young, in the generation before the Holocaust still, in the generation of the Chavetz Chaim and Reb Chaim Ozer, Kfar Amad Rabbeinu B'Shur Rishona, he was top tier up there. Shel Gedolei Yisrael Manhigav. But after HaChorban HaNorah, after the Holocaust, when there was a different calling, when the world needed something else, and he knew he was the man who could provide that something else, he took off the crown of Gadol Ador, the Gon Olam, that was on his head. And he still remained a Gon, of course. But the crown he took off. And he pushed it off of himself, B'Ratzon, because he saw the purpose of his life was to be Mekim Torah B'Yisrael. Lakim Yeshiva L'Bnei Torah, Yeshiva for Yeshiva Light, Yeshiva Yarchikala for Balabatim, as we mentioned last week. Most of the Tinok Shel Beis Rabban, men's and girls schools, the Yaldei Yisrael, Pulat Tzadik L'Chaim Shel Yisrael. That is what his life became. And I always like to sum this up, I think, with a vort, an idea that he taught from the Chavetz Chaim. Where do you get the koach from? Where do you get the power to do that? To be someone who builds when you really want to do something else and give up. So we'll talk about that. He was a great Talmud of the Chavetz Chaim. The Chavetz Chaim said, "V'haptes Hashem Elokecha, v'chol levavcha, v'chol nafshecha, v'chol modecha." the tone of the pasuk. The idea is whatever is most precious to you. As we know, Chazal say, some person likes his mammon more, some people likes his nefesh more. Whatever it is, you have to give that thing up. And for B'nai Torah, for Ovei Torah, what's the most precious thing? Their Torah. He says, Abbas Hashem requires sometimes to give that up also, if that's what's needed. And the Ponevezher Rav would say that over. I don't know if he said it about himself, but he saw that as a vision and a plateau and an idea to live your life by. And certainly, maybe as much as almost anybody else, that was a message that he lived his life by.